losing friends while being sick. Let's talk about it. So, before I had toxic mold, I had quite a few friends. I had a couple different friend groups that were like these small groups. And I talked to them on a daily basis, and I was a very social kind of a person for the most part. And then when I got sick with toxic mold, it was it was a slow progression in a way. Like my symptoms came on rather quickly and got worse progressively, but I think the realization that I was sick it came on very slow. And so it took me a long time. It took me a long time to really realize how severe it was. And even when I tried to tell people, tell my friends, tell people in my life about it, they didn't really understand. And it would be maybe like a month would go by, and I would be talking to them less and less because my mind just became more and more fogged. My energy level was severely affected, and when they would want to catch up, or when they would be messaging me and I finally mustered up like the energy to message them back, I would let them know, like, hey, I'm still sick. Like I'll try to get back to you more often, but I still tried to maintain it for so long. I tried to maintain all of these friend groups, and they just didn't understand. And I mean, how could they, I guess? But it is also kind of crazy because I think unless you experience being sick, whether that's toxic mold like I had, or some other chronic illness, or some other third thing, it seems like sickness, especially the ones that are sort of these invisible illnesses, right? The ones that involve a lot of fatigue, a lot of brain fog, right? These illnesses look invisible to the average person's eye. And so it's like, how could they understand? How could they really truly understand when they've never experienced it? At least to this level, because even me, through my own experience going through it was hard for me to understand. I had adrenal fatigue throughout my life, and so I never had like boundless energy like a lot of people have, right? But I still battled with the loss of energy that I was having, and that was even hard for me to understand, much less them. They did not understand at all. And so, a month would go by and I would say I'm sick, and I would get responses like, still? Like, you're still going through that? Okay. Like, and after a while, okay, because I was sick with toxic mold for 3 years, after a couple of months, you start to notice these friends kind of dropping off a little bit. Like, okay, this girl's always sick. She's just, she doesn't really talk to me anymore. I don't know. Like, might as well just, we don't really need to talk to her at all anymore, or even try, which I don't blame them in a lot of ways. I don't know, it's not something I would do, but I think for some people, maybe friendships only hold important weight when they are maintained. I don't know. But that's what happened, you know? And over time, I think people began to be more and more confused. Like, okay, well, how serious is this? And okay, like, why is she continuing to be sick? Like, can't you just like heal and get over it? Like, I don't really get it. And then when you tell anybody the type of sickness that you have, that's when you kind of really see who the real people, the real, true, authentic people in your life are. And for me, in a lot of instances, it was nearly nobody. But because when you tell them that some of your symptoms involve fatigue and brain fog, there's such a disconnect towards what those mean. And so some people think that means, oh, they're just real sleepy. Like, okay, so you sleep a lot. Okay, well, take a nap and wake up and feel better then. And it's like, that's not what fatigue is. Especially when we're talking about in terms of an illness. Fatigue can be all encompassing, and it can, especially if it's like a connected to cortisol, which fatigue so often is, it is this like inability to accomplish basic tasks most of the time. It is this inability to, it's not even just like getting winded necessarily. It is a complete exhaustion constantly. It's like it's a wired but tired so often too, where you are awake, but you never get that boost of energy. It lasts almost eternally, it feels. And for some people, maybe that's a concept that they've never experienced in their life. And so there was a lot of that going on, a lot of, okay, we'll take a nap, get better. Okay, well, I don't really get it. Like, quick fix. I don't, it's not clicking to me how you're still sick after months, right? But it is also interesting too, because you know, those people don't understand, and they haven't experienced it, you know, and so it's a little hard for them to understand things, I guess, that they haven't experienced truly. But there are people who can even see the decline oftentimes in us, you know. Some people have lost family members, myself included in this. Family members who were in such close proximity that they could visually see the changes in you, and decided to still exist without empathy, or exist without trying to view things from the other person's lens, even if it is next to impossible, that effort. You can feel when the effort isn't there. And over time you start to realize that, wow, these people were never really there for me. You know, these people were never truly willing to stay with me, even when I was just a shell of a person at times, or felt like a shell of a person. I guess when there is no benefit on their end, things end. You know, it reminds me of this, the trend on TikTok, would you still love me if I were a worm? And I think there are people who get what that means, and there's people who don't get what that question really means. I think there's a lot of people who don't get what that question really means. That question really isn't, would you still love me if I were a worm? Because it's this like silly kind of question that a lot of people were trending on TikTok for asking their significant other to see what their response would be, if it would be sweet, if they wouldn't get it. Because that question doesn't really mean, would you still love me if I were warm? It really just means, would you still love me if I didn't have any real value to you? You know? Would you still be there for me would you take care of me if I couldn't be of significant value to the society that we know currently? And there are some people who don't get that, and there are some people who really do. I think I need to collect my thoughts for the next portion. Okay, now, not everybody had left. Some people still really tried and still always kept that door open of, I'm always here, I'm always going to be here when you return, when you collect your health back. And I always appreciate those people. But the other connecting aspect to losing friends and friendships and relationships when you are sick is that you yourself change. Like I said, I had toxic mold for 3 years. And it changed me completely as a human being. I mean, I had been through a lot of trauma in it, directly related to the toxic mold and also outside sources. I also went through this during 2020, which is ironic because, or it feels ironic to me because 2020 had very little actual effect on me, and not in the ways that you think, in the ways that I was battling a battle that so much, it felt so much greater in my personal life than 2020, even though it was chaotic. It really was, but it was just interesting because I was battling this completely separate, all-encompassing, world-changing experience during that time. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that part, but I changed so much as a person. And as friends would message me, and I just felt so brain dead, honestly. I felt like a zombie. I was also doing other things to keep me occupied. I've said this before on here, but like, YouTube was honestly one of my saving graces during this time because, well, my mind felt like it just couldn't do anything. I was like a shell of a person, honestly, oftentimes. I at least felt like I was being useful by watching YouTube videos and at least gaining some information or calming myself down or whatever. And I was, in a way, working on myself in ways that I never knew needed to be worked on. And even that whole aspect of losing my friendships during this time, and isolation, and realizing that maybe I'm okay by myself sometimes, you know, because I was always talking to friends. I was always in communication with people. And there was a certain point where I forgot how to exist by myself with my own thoughts. And I think a big part of me was scared too. Like I was running away from me in a lot of ways. And this forced me to no longer run away from me. That's all I had was me sometimes. Especially since my cortisol was shot, absolutely tanked, plummeted. There were scary levels, people, scary levels. And that meant that most of my time was spent awake at night. There was a certain point in time in my life when I couldn't possibly wake up before 6 p.m. It felt like an impossibility. It took every strength in my body to wake up at 6 p.m. And I got just that glimmer of sunlight. And there were specific days where I felt like I could work myself up to waking up a little bit earlier and running on very little sleep, but that only worked a few times, and that just caused further stress on my cortisol and my adrenals. And so my life existed in darkness. When everybody, is asleep, and it just sort of, I guess, pushed me into that self-exploration. Just a moment. That sun was catching up to me just a little bit. But anyway. I just felt like I had grown so much. And then when I was noticing, when I started to detox, and I was doing the bentonite clay and the Soleil water and the chlorophyll, I would take chlorophyll almost every day, and I loved the way I felt taking chlorophyll. But when I was detoxing, I started to gain a little bit more energy or like mental clarity, and I would try to talk to some of my friends again, and it was just weird because I think it was like a culture shock, because I was almost transported back into my old life in a way, and it felt uncomfortable, like the same conversations that they were having and the way that they were speaking, and it was just like I was transported back, and it felt like such a big jump, and it was quite I guess shocking to realize just how much I had grown, because it didn't feel right anymore, even though it felt familiar to talk to them. And it just didn't feel like me. I didn't relate to the conversations anymore, and I felt like I had just been through this, natural disaster in a way, or this world-shaking event, and then going back to this life as though it never happened, and it just felt very out of place. And I realized that I didn't even want to talk about the same things that I used to talk about, or spend my time thinking about the same things that I thought about, or speaking the same ways that I was speaking. And even my goals had shifted greatly. I mean, when I was still in toxic mold, my main goal was just to get out and heal, and that seemed like climbing Mount Everest, like truly. But my goals had changed, And even after healing, getting out and healing, when some of them would reach back out to me, it made me really realize that I am just a different person and that I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with that. You know? Things have shifted and changed. I think that's all my thoughts that I had to say about that.